Dear Taurus, some days begin in a very strange way, not because the alarm did not go off, not because you overslept or lost motivation. Everything still unfolds the way it usually does. It is just that the rhythm feels a little slower, and without trying to, you slow down too. I have watched many people who carry Taurus energy during moments like this. They do not complain. They do not say out loud that they are tired. That morning, they simply stand a little longer by the window. They watch the sunlight move across a familiar room without rushing to reach for their phone, as if something inside them is breathing at a different pace now, quietly setting the direction. For Taurus, this slowing down rarely comes from the outside. It does not need a shock. It does not need a major event. It arrives softly, like a familiar road that suddenly has a thin layer of morning mist. You can still walk it. You just do not feel like rushing anymore. Sometimes, even Taurus does not fully understand what is happening. Everything around you still feels fine. The work is still there. Relationships continue as usual. Yet somewhere inside, there is a vague heaviness. Not sadness. Not quite worry. Just a sense that you no longer want to tense yourself the way you used to. I remember sitting with a Taurus friend one late evening. Only half the lights in the room were on. Outside, the city was still bright. Inside that room, we sat in silence for several minutes. Then my friend let out a very soft breath and said, without really finishing the thought, lately, everything feels slower. I do not know why. That sentence sounded very Taurus. Not dramatic, no explanation, just an honest noticing. Perhaps when Taurus energy enters a phase like this, the body and the mind are quietly doing something important. They are slowing down, not to stop, but to listen. To listen for where you may have been moving too fast. To notice what you were trying to hold together and why. And to sense if something no longer wants to walk beside you. This slowing down can make Taurus feel slightly uneasy at times, because Taurus is used to stability, used to feeling that everything is under control. When the natural rhythm softens, a small voice inside may wonder, am I missing something? But if you look more closely, you may notice that nothing is truly falling apart during these days. The familiar flame is simply burning smaller. It no longer flares brightly, but it is still warm. And perhaps that quiet warmth is exactly what Taurus needs right now. There are mornings like this, when you pause for a few extra seconds before leaving the house. There are evenings when you do not want to turn on music, when you only want to sit in a quiet room and listen to the clock move through time, not because of loneliness, but because, for the first time in a long while, you allow yourself not to rush. It feels strange, does it not? There is no clear event, no warning sign. Yet the heart feels heavy in a very personal way. And maybe, in this slowing down, Taurus is being gently invited to look again at the rhythm of life. Not to judge it, not to fix it right away, just to notice how far you have come and what you still want to carry on the road ahead. That question does not arrive loudly. It does not ask for an immediate answer. It simply stays there, quietly, like a small stone in your pocket that you feel each time you take a step. It does not hurt, but it is enough to remind you that you are carrying something. And then you begin to notice that there are things you have kept exactly where they are. Not because you still need them, but because you are used to them being there. Like a chair that has sat in the corner of the room for years. No one sits in it anymore, yet it has never been moved. Every day you walk past it. It does not block your way. It does not bother you. It is just that the room does not feel as warm as it once did. Taurus is often like this. Once you grow accustomed to a rhythm, a person, or a way of thinking, you do not let go easily. Not out of stubbornness, but because that familiarity once held a very real sense of safety. There were times when those habits helped you stay steady. Times when they kept you from being swept away as everything around you shifted. But as time passes, not everything that once supported you can continue to do so forever. There are evenings when you come home at the same hour as always. You do the same familiar things. You turn on the light. You make a cup of tea the same way you always have. And yet, when you finally sit down, you notice a quiet emptiness inside. Not sadness, just the absence of a warmth that used to be there. It is like placing your hand on a familiar wall and realizing it has gone cold. You do not hate these habits. You may even feel grateful for them. But you cannot deny that they no longer hold you the way they once did. There is a distance now. Very small. Very thin. Just enough for you to realize that you are standing in a different place. Taurus rarely changes all at once. You tend to stay a little longer, watch a little more. You wonder whether this feeling will pass, or whether it is a gentle sign that you have grown beyond what once made you feel safe. At times, you try to force yourself back into the old feeling. You keep the same schedule. You maintain everything exactly as it was. But the more you try, the more tired you become. Not because the work is heavier, but because you are pretending to be comfortable in a space that no longer fits. The room is still the same room. The light is still on. But somehow, the cold has slipped in without you noticing. Not cold enough to make you leave right away. Just cold enough that you pull your sleeves down a little. Then a little more. Until you realize you are curling inward inside the very place that once made you feel safe. And perhaps that moment of noticing is what truly matters. Not to blame yourself for changing. Not to fault old habits for no longer working. Just an honest acknowledgement that some things have completed their role. They were once necessary. Once warm. But now, your energy needs a different kind of space to breathe. No one is pushing you to clean everything up at once. No one is asking you to throw it all away. There is only a gentle sense that if you keep carrying everything you are used to, your steps will grow heavier on the road ahead. And Taurus, with your own quiet sensitivity, begins to feel this. Not through logic, but through ordinary moments, through silence, through feelings that are difficult to name. Some exhaustion does not come from doing too much. It comes from holding on too tightly. Taurus does not always notice this right away. You are used to carrying things in silence, used to being the one who keeps everything from falling apart. So you keep holding, you keep enduring, as if just a little more patience will make everything feel steady again. But the body does not lie. There are mornings when you wake up with your shoulders slightly heavier. Not painful, just not light. There are evenings when you sit beneath a late-night lamp, staring into the empty space in front of you, with no energy left to think another thought. Not sadness, not irritation, just a very particular kind of emptiness. The way Taurus holds on is rarely loud. You do not complain. You do not make a scene. You quietly rearrange everything in your mind, trying to find a way for things to remain fine. But sometimes, the price of that stability is the softness inside you. There are moments when you wonder why you feel this tired, even though nothing truly bad seems to be happening. Work is still moving forward. The people around you seem fine. From the outside, life looks completely acceptable. Yet inside, there is a small flame growing weaker. It has not gone out. It is just no longer bright enough to keep you warm. Trying to keep everything intact can feel like holding a door that never quite closes. Your hand has to stay there. You cannot step away. You cannot rest. And slowly, the act of holding becomes the heaviest task of the day. Not everyone sees this fatigue. To many people, Taurus still appears steady, reliable, solid. The familiar anchor. But only you know how many quiet adjustments you have made. How many feelings you have swallowed just to avoid disturbing what already exists. There are very small, very ordinary moments when you suddenly realize that you are holding on not because you believe it still makes you happy, but because you are afraid of the emptiness that might follow if you let go. Afraid the room will feel too wide. Afraid the road ahead will no longer feel familiar. Afraid of beginning again, even if only in your thoughts. And that very Taurus kind of fear keeps you moving slowly, carrying more than you truly need. Each step is not heavy enough to bring you down, but it is heavy enough to make you sigh more often. Heavy enough that at night, after turning off the light, you lie still for a few extra minutes, not wanting to think about tomorrow yet. The truth is, no one has asked you to carry everything. There is no rule that says things are only safe when you hold them tightly. But Taurus often forgets this. You are used to being the one who keeps the rhythm, the one who holds the foundation, the one who stays in place so nothing shifts too far, until you begin to feel one thing very clearly. This exhaustion is not a sign of weakness. It is a very small, very patient whisper, reminding you that you have been walking a long time without setting the weight down even once. And sometimes, simply realizing that you are tired is already a very big step. After that moment, nothing changes right away. Morning still arrives. Work is still waiting. The familiar road still carries you forward as it always has. Yet something inside has shifted, very lightly, so subtle you might miss it if you are not listening closely. It is like standing beneath a late-night streetlight, your shadow stretching longer than usual, and suddenly becoming more aware of your own presence. From there, a small question begins to appear in your mind. Not sharp, not demanding. It comes and goes, then returns again, like the sound of wind brushing against a window each night. What if I did not carry this anymore? What would happen then? That question does not bring the fear you once expected. It does not ask for an immediate decision. It simply opens a very thin space in your thoughts, just enough to let you glimpse another possibility. One you were afraid to touch before, because you worried it might disrupt everything. Sometimes the question shows up while you are driving along a familiar road. The traffic light turns red. You stop, and in that brief pause, the thought passes through. Not clearly, not in words, just a feeling that if you were a little lighter, this stretch of road might feel different. Sometimes it arrives while you are tidying a room. Your hand lands on an old object, something that once mattered deeply. You stand there for a few seconds, unsure whether to keep it or set it aside. Not because of its material value, but because it is tied to an earlier version of you, and you wonder whether you still need to carry that version forward. Taurus does not usually ask the big questions about life. You do not seek dramatic change. But when this question appears, it does not frighten you. It simply slows your thinking. It deepens it. It asks you to be more honest with what you feel. There were burdens you carried because you believed you had to. Because you thought that setting them down would throw everything out of balance. Now, in this quiet space, you begin to sense something different. Perhaps you are steady enough that you no longer need to hold everything. The question does not push you to let go right away. It stays patiently, like a small flame burning steadily in the corner of the room. Not bright enough to light the path ahead, but warm enough to remind you that you no longer want to keep walking in the cold. Each time the question returns, you do not push it away as quickly as before. You let it stay a little longer. You listen more fully, not to force an answer, but to allow yourself to admit something gently. There were things you needed to carry to reach this point, but they do not all have to travel with you forever. And in that quiet repetition, you begin to understand that this question is not a sign of giving up. It is a sign of growth, of a Taurus learning how to set things down, not because you are becoming weaker, but because you are strong enough to keep moving forward with less weight. When that thought settles, a very different feeling begins to surface. Not light right away, not clear, just a very small opening inside, like pushing open a door that has not been used in a long time. The light does not rush in immediately, but you know the space beyond is there, waiting. Letting go, for Taurus, is rarely a decisive act. It is not like throwing away something that is broken. It is more like standing in a familiar room, looking around slowly, then placing your hand on each object in turn. Some things still hold value. Some things are no longer needed, even though they are still intact, and some things you keep only because they have been there for so long. No one teaches Taurus how to let go. You learn it yourself, gradually, through very ordinary moments. An afternoon spent clearing your desk, stacking old papers neatly without reading them again. A glance at your to-do list, crossing off something that no longer brings any real interest. A meeting you stop trying to maintain just to keep the peace. Each of these small actions makes no sound. No one applauds. But inside you begin to feel something more clearly. You are making space. The room inside a Taurus mind is often full of responsibility, full of habit, full of things you believe you should hold on to. When everything is crowded, light has trouble getting in. But when even one corner opens up, no matter how small, the air changes. You may notice this on a very quiet evening. Warm light spilling across the floor. You sit there, doing nothing in particular, and feel lighter. Not because every problem has been solved. Simply because you are no longer carrying everything at once. Letting go, in this way, does not take away who you are. It does not make you unfamiliar to yourself. Instead, it brings you closer to your true rhythm, a rhythm that does not need to strain to prove that everything is fine. There is a gentle Taurus quality in the way you rearrange your inner space. You do not rush. You do not judge the past. You quietly acknowledge that what once fit has completed its role. It was necessary. It was warm. And now, you need a new breath of space to continue. When a corner opens up, you begin to notice what was previously hidden. A new thought. A softer feeling when you wake up. A very small but very real desire that you could not hear before because you were too busy keeping everything intact. This lightness is not loud. It does not make you announce that you have freed yourself from anything. It simply exists, quietly, like a small flame burning steadily in the corner of the room. Not bright, but warm enough. And little by little, you understand why letting go matters so much. Not because it makes life perfect, but because it allows you to walk forward without dragging along what no longer belongs on the road ahead. In that open space, Taurus does not lose anything truly essential. You are simply making room for light, for warmth, and for yourself to breathe in a rhythm that feels right, within a silence that is familiar and deeply real. And it is within that quiet that another feeling begins to come into focus. A sense that some things around you no longer fit the way they once did. Not wrong, not bad, just no longer fitting. At first, Taurus often responds by resisting this. You wonder why you feel out of step when everything on the outside still seems fine. You once believed that if you tried a little harder, what felt familiar would fit again, just as it used to. There are evenings when you sit alone, late light falling across the floor, and a very honest question rises in your mind. Why have I changed? The question does not carry blame, but it is enough to leave you unsettled. Because Taurus does not like being the one who changes first. You are used to being the anchor, the foundation, the presence that keeps everything steady. But when you stop fighting that feeling, you begin to see it differently. Not as something broken that needs fixing, but as a natural sign of growth. Like a pair of shoes that once fit perfectly, that carried you across many roads, but one day, even though they are still in good shape, you cannot wear them anymore without discomfort. The shoes are not wrong, and neither are you. You begin to realize that you have walked farther, moved through different seasons, gathered experiences your earlier self never knew, and those experiences have quietly reshaped you from the inside. Not loudly, not suddenly, just enough that what once held you completely now feels tight. There are relationships that once felt easy that now make you weigh every word. There are habits that once made you feel safe that now feel like repetition. And there are choices that were right at one time that no longer bring the same sense of steadiness. In the past, Taurus often tried to force yourself back into the old shape. You adjusted your rhythm, managed your emotions, convincing yourself that the feeling of not fitting was only temporary. But the more you did that, the more tired you became. Not because you lacked patience, but because you were asking yourself to shrink to fit a space that had already grown old. At some point, very naturally, you stop resisting. not because you are giving up, but because you no longer want to hurt yourself just to keep everything unchanged. You allow the feeling to exist, without judgment, without trying to push it away. And strangely, when you stop fighting it, it becomes lighter. In that gentle acceptance, you begin to see yourself more clearly. No need to define it. No need to explain it to anyone. Just a Taurus who has lived enough to understand that fit must evolve with time. What once held you has completed its role. And now, you no longer need to force yourself back into an old shape. You simply move forward with a little more space around you, and with a calm that comes from knowing this. You are not wrong for growing, and you do not owe anyone the effort of staying the same. When that thought settles, a very different kind of gentleness begins to flow into everyday life. Not the kind that is shown outwardly, but a quiet softness, something only you can feel. Like allowing yourself to walk a little slower on a familiar road, not because anyone told you to, but because your body asked for it. Like turning off one light in the room, so the brightness feels just right. Not too harsh, not too dim. This season does not ask you to change your name, change your direction, or become someone else. It simply places a very soft invitation in your hands to treat yourself more gently, to push less when your heart is not ready, to strain less to meet expectations that have grown old, to endure less in silence just to make things look fine. There are mornings when you choose to eat more slowly. You take a longer sip of coffee. You listen to the sound of a spoon touching the cup. There are evenings when you allow yourself not to reply to a message right away. Not out of neglect, but because you need to protect a small pocket of quiet for yourself. These changes are very small, so small that others may never notice. But to you, they feel like softer notes loosening the tension in the music of your life. This gentleness does not make you weaker. It does not take away your natural steadiness. Instead, it strengthens your inner foundation, because you are no longer building it on endurance alone. You begin to set down the expectations you placed on yourself, the silent shoulds you have carried for too long, and when you set them down, you do not feel the emptiness you once feared. You simply feel lighter. Letting go here is not a grand declaration. It is the way you say no with kindness, to others and to yourself. It is the pause you take before agreeing to one more thing that would exhaust you. It is the moment you realize you do not need to explain so much in order to be at peace. In that quiet room, a small flame burns steadily. It does not flare up to impress. It only warms enough for you to stay with yourself without needing to escape. And you begin to understand that real care is not loud. It is quiet, persistent, deeply Taurus. As you become gentler with yourself, the world around you softens in its own way. Not because everything suddenly improves, but because you no longer collide with life using the sharp edges of constant strain. You walk with a steadier breath, a softer gaze, and a calm that comes from knowing this. You are allowed to choose lightness. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to set things down. And within that softness, you do not lose your strength. You simply change how you use it. Not to hold everything up, but to support yourself, day by day, within a silence that feels familiar and deeply real. And perhaps it is that very silence that allows everything to come into clearer view. Not in a bright or impressive way, but like morning light slipping through the curtains, just enough for you to see your room as it truly is. As you become lighter, not because you leave the past behind, but because you no longer carry everything at once, life's rhythm begins to feel more honest. No need to prove anything. No need to compare. Some days pass in the most ordinary way. You walk the familiar road. You hear familiar sounds. You move through familiar tasks. The difference is simple. You are no longer dragging behind you what you no longer need. Your steps feel steadier even if they are not faster. And within that steadiness, there is a quiet sense of reassurance that comes from living in tune with your own breath. What matters most in a season does not always lie in what is added. Not in a longer list of achievements. not in clearer goals. Sometimes it lies in what you are gentle enough to set down when you realize it has completed its purpose. What you place down does not disappear. It simply steps aside, making room for new space. Space wide enough to breathe deeply. Space calm enough to remain. You may notice this in a very small moment. Turning the lights off a little earlier. Choosing a quieter street. Letting silence speak instead of adding more words. These choices do not need witnesses. They only need to feel right to you in this moment. And if you pause for just a second to listen, you might find yourself wondering whether there is something you are carrying only because it is familiar, not because it is still needed. That question does not ask for an answer right away. It simply stays there, an open invitation to observe, to choose, and to move forward a little more lightly. The story settles here, not with a period, but with a pause. A pause long enough to feel your own breathing, and gentle enough to carry with you the sense that within this familiar quiet, you are living honestly, in your own way.